Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm excited to have you here today. Today, we're going to explore the important topic of tahara, or cleanliness. This presentation is brought to you by Continuous Learning Development, and it's presented by Sheikha Shafalia Younis. We'll be discussing what tahara means, why it's important, and how we can incorporate it into our daily lives. So, let's get started and learn about this vital aspect of personal and spiritual hygiene. Welcome to Slide 2. Today I want to highlight a powerful saying: cleanliness is half of faith. This phrase emphasizes how important cleanliness is in our spiritual and moral lives. It suggests that maintaining cleanliness, whether physically or in our character, is a fundamental part of practicing faith sincerely. When we talk about faith, we're often thinking about beliefs and devotion, but this reminds us that the way we present ourselves and keep our surroundings clean reflects our inner discipline and respect for our beliefs. Connecting this to the broader theme of our presentation, it shows that faith isn't just about rituals. It's also about making mindful choices that show integrity and respect, starting with something as simple as cleanliness. So, let's keep this idea in mind as we move forward. Let's take a moment to explore the different kinds of water. When we talk about water, we're not just talking about one simple substance. There are various types, each with unique characteristics and uses. For example, fresh water is what we typically find in lakes, rivers, and groundwater, essential for drinking, agriculture, and daily life. Then there is salt water, which makes up the vast majority of our oceans. While it's not suitable for drinking without treatment, it plays a crucial role in regulating our planet's climate and supporting marine life. We also have mineral water, which contains naturally occurring minerals and is often bottled for drinking. Then there's wastewater, which is used water from homes, industries, and agriculture that needs proper treatment before being released back into the environment. Understanding these different kinds of water helps us appreciate their importance and the need for responsible management. Throughout this presentation, we'll see how each type impacts our environment and our daily lives, emphasizing the need for sustainable practices in water use and conservation. Let's talk about the fuqaha's condition of wudu, which emphasizes that water must be clean to be used. But here's the key point: water is considered unusable if it's unclean. So, cleanliness is essential for water to be valid for wudu and even for drinking. Now, we'll look at the different types of water, those that are pure and suitable for use, and those that are impure and unfit. Understanding this distinction is important because it directly affects whether water can be used for our spiritual and physical needs. When determining if water is impure, several factors come into play. One is the quantity of water. Some fuqaha say that very small amounts can become impure more easily. Then, substances that change or alter the water's natural state can render it impure. Lastly, animals that have used the water can also be a cause for impurity, depending on the circumstances. So, in summary, the purity of water depends on these factors, and recognizing them helps us ensure our wudu and drinking water remain pure and valid for our religious obligations. This connects directly to our overall goal of maintaining purity in our worship and daily life. Let's explore the concept of mutlaq water, which is considered the purest form of water. First, we have rainwater, which comes from the sky. As mentioned in the Quran, "And sent down water from the sky upon you that thereby he might purify you," from Surah Al-Anfal. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, also recited a dua when washing his heart with snow, water, and hail, emphasizing the purifying nature of rainwater. Next is seawater. According to a hadith from Sahih Bukhari, water is generally considered pure for ablution, and even dead animals found in the sea are regarded as pure. This highlights the natural purity attributed to seawater in Islamic teachings. Then we have Zamzam water, which holds a special place. The Prophet Piba drank Zamzam water and also used it for wudu, making it a highly revered and pure source of water. Lastly, let's consider altered water. This refers to water that has been sitting in a place for a long time or has become altered due to its environment. It might be mixed with algae, leaves, or other substances that can't be fully removed. Despite these changes, this water is still considered mutlaq, or pure, because it has not been contaminated in a way that invalidates its purity. Understanding these different types of water helps us grasp the broader concept of purity in Islamic teachings, especially when it comes to purification rituals. On this slide, we're looking at the concept of used water, specifically pure water. When water drips from a person after performing ablution or ghusl, it is considered pure. An interesting story that highlights this is about Abu Hurairah, who met the Prophet in Medina. He slipped away to purify himself from post-sexual impurity, and when he returned, the Prophet asked where he had gone. Abu Hurairah explained that he went to purify himself because he didn't want to be in the Prophet's company in an impure state. The Prophet responded that the believer does not become impure. This teaches us that the water used for purification remains pure even after contact with the person. The key point here is that since the water was pure before touching the person, and the person isn't considered impure, the water itself does not become impure. It's also worth noting that there are different opinions on this matter, particularly among the Maliki and Shafi schools, which recognize this concept of water's purity in these circumstances. Now, moving on, we will explore the different types of water, which are important to understand for purity and purification in Islam. Let's talk about water mixed with pure elements. When we say pure water, we mean water that hasn't been mixed with anything else, or at least not enough to change its fundamental nature. For example, water mixed with soap, saffron, or flowers. These are considered pure as long as the mixture isn't extensive enough to turn it away from what we recognize as water. Even though it's still technically pure, it may no longer be usable for purification purposes. This is something mentioned in Fiqh as-Sunnah. Now, there's an important point from the scholars like Sheikh Fawzan, who say that if water is mixed with a pure substance, it remains pure and can still be used for purification, especially according to the stronger opinion. And here's a practical example from the Hadiths. There's a narration where the Prophet, Piba and Maymuna washed themselves from a single water container that had a trace of dough in it. Even though the water was mixed with something else, because it was just a small amount, it was still suitable for purification. So the key takeaway is that the purity of water depends on how much it's been mixed with other substances and what the mixture is. Small traces of pure substances don't necessarily ruin the water's status for purification, but larger or more extensive mixtures might. This helps us understand the different types of water and their use in purification. Let's talk about water mixed with impure elements. First, we have to consider whether the water is pure or impure. When water is altered by impurities that change its taste, color, or smell, most people agree that it cannot be used for purification because these changes indicate contamination. On the other hand, if the water contains impurities but hasn't had its taste, color, or smell altered, it can still be considered pure. This means the impurities are present, but they haven't affected the water's sensory qualities enough to disqualify it. Now, the amount of water also matters. Large quantities of water with impurities still generally remain usable and considered pure because the impurities are diluted. However, when small amounts of water are polluted with impurities, it becomes unsafe and is considered impure. Understanding these distinctions helps us evaluate water quality more accurately, especially when considering different sources and their suitability for use. It connects directly to the overall theme of water purification and ensuring safe, clean water for everyone. On this slide, we're exploring different perspectives from the Fuqaha regarding the purity of water. First, Maliki believes that water is considered pure whether or not it is mixed with impurities, regardless of the quantity. This means that even if there's a large or small amount of impurity, the water remains pure in their view. However, Maliki also states that small quantities of impurity can spoil or defile the water. So, while water might be considered pure generally, even a tiny impurity can affect its purity depending on the context. Moving to Abu Hanafi, he held the belief that if a large amount of water is disturbed by a ripple, like someone tossing a stone in a pond, that water would still be regarded as pure, provided the ripple doesn't reach the other side. This highlights that minor disturbances don't necessarily compromise water's purity in his view. Next, Shafi makes an interesting point about the volume of water, saying that two containers, each weighing about 500 rattle, approximately 135 liters each, remain pure even when mixed with impure substances. So, the sheer volume acts as a safeguard against impurity affecting the entire quantity. Finally, Hanbali emphasizes that large vessels or flowing water are considered pure unless there is a change in color, taste, or smell. If none of these qualities are altered, the water remains pure, regardless of impurities in small quantities. Overall, these differing perspectives highlight the importance of context, volume, disturbance, and sensory qualities in determining water's purity according to various schools of thought. Let's explore the different types of leftover water and what makes them pure or impure. First, leftover water after people have drunk from a pot is still considered pure, regardless of whether the person is Muslim or non-Muslim. This means that once the water is in the pot, it remains pure for drinking and purification purposes. Next, if water remains in a container after a halal animal, like a cow or a sheep, has drank from it, that water is also considered pure. This is important because it allows us to keep water for purification without concern. Similarly, water left in a pot after being drunk by donkeys, mules, or even beasts of prey like birds of prey is still considered pure for drinking and purification. This is supported by hadiths from scholars like al-Daraqutni, al-Bayhaqi, and al-Muwatta, where a man was instructed by the Prophet and Umar not to disclose if a pond's water had been drunk from by donkeys or wild animals. Now, what about water after a cat has drunk from it? According to a hadith from Qatada, a cat remains pure, so water left in the pot after a cat drinks from it is also considered pure. However, the situation changes when it comes to pigs or dogs. Water that a pig or dog has drunk from is considered impure, and it must be avoided for purification or drinking. If a dog licks a container, that container needs to be washed 7 times, with the first wash using dirt or mud. Understanding these distinctions helps us maintain purity in our water sources and aligns with the principles of cleanliness and purity in our faith.